Hello everyone! Today I am going to be presenting my research study which focuses on attitudes and beliefs about smoking and vaping in social settings among adults. Let's start. In this presentation, I will guide you through the following sections of my study: the introduction and literature review, methods, results, and discussion. First and foremost, here's a diagram illustrating the theory of planned behavior, or TPB, which I applied to predict adults' intentions to smoke or vape in social settings. This theory is essential for understanding how attitudes, perceived normative pressure, or subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control, PBC, can influence behavior. The theory of planned behavior, also known as the recent action approach, predicts behavioral intentions through attitudes, subjective norms, and PBC. This diagram demonstrates how these components interact. Behavioral beliefs shape an individual's attitudes toward the behavior. Normative beliefs influence perceived normative pressure. Control beliefs determine an individual's perceived behavioral control, PBC. According to TPB, attitudes and perceived normative pressure influence intentions, whereas PBC directly affects behavior. While actual behavioral control refers to the resources available to perform the behavior, PBC is often used as a predictor due to its ease of measurement. My topic was using the theory of planned behavior to predict adults who smoke or vape's intention to smoke cigarettes or vape nicotine in social settings over the next 2 weeks. I gathered previous research from the 10 sources that you see listed here on this slide. Let's dive deeper into them in the next 2 slides. Eisen provides the foundational framework for the theory of planned behavior. Eisen's method involved theoretical analysis and synthesis of existing research on attitudes, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control to propose a model explaining how these components predict behavioral intentions. Connor and Norman conducted a review and synthesis of empirical studies examining the relationship between PBC and health behaviors, including smoking. They used meta-analytic techniques to quantify the strength of the association between PBC and behavioral intentions across multiple studies. El-Wafi et al. Performed a randomized controlled trial involving 150 participants. Participants were randomly assigned to either a mindfulness training group or a control group. The mindfulness training included techniques to reduce cravings and promote self-regulation, and the study measured smoking behavior and cravings before and after the intervention. Hager and Shatsirantis utilized a meta-analytic approach to examine how cultural and contextual factors influence the relationships between attitudes, norms, and PBC in predicting smoking and vaping intentions. They aggregated data from various studies to identify patterns and moderating factors. Hoey et al. Conducted a longitudinal study examining the role of social influences on smoking behavior. They surveyed adolescents at multiple points in time to assess changes in smoking behavior and perceptions of normative pressure from peers and family. McNeil et al. Used data from the International Tobacco Control 4-Country Smoking and Vaping Survey, which included over 12,000 participants from the United States, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. The survey collected detailed information on smoking and vaping behaviors, dependence indicators, and social context variables. McWilliams et al. Performed a meta-analysis of 25 studies with over 10,000 participants to examine the effectiveness of implementation intentions in smoking cessation. They analyzed studies that employed specific if-then plans to reduce smoking, focusing on how these plans affected PBC and smoking behavior. Simpson et al. Conducted a quasi-experimental study with 1,500 secondary school students aged 13 through 18. The intervention group participated in educational sessions designed using TPB to address attitudes, norms, and PBC related to e-cigarette use. The study measured intentions to vape, perceptions of social approval, and confidence in resisting peer pressure before and after the intervention. Topa and Mariano performed a meta-analysis of TPB studies on smoking behavior. They included studies with diverse populations ranging from adolescents to adults and varied sample sizes. The meta-analysis focused on the predictive power of attitudes, subjective norms, and PBC on smoking intentions and behavior. Vries et al. Used a cross-sectional survey design to examine the influence of perceived normative pressure on smoking behavior. They surveyed a large sample of adolescents to assess their smoking intentions and perceptions of social pressure from peers and family. To remind you of the purpose of this study, it was to use the theory of planned behavior to examine attitude, perceived normative pressure, and perceived behavioral control to understand adult smokers or vapers' intention towards smoking cigarettes or vaping nicotine in social group settings over the next 2 weeks. My hypothesis was that positive attitudes towards smoking and vaping, perceived normative pressure, and a low sense of PBC would all increase the likelihood of intending to smoke or vape. For the first part of the methods section, I'm going to be guiding you through my participants and procedures from this study. There were 49 total participants, 37 being females, 11 males, and 1 participant who preferred not to answer their sex. Participants ranged in age from 18 to 67 years old. This study was comprised of mostly non-Hispanic whites and Euro-Americans, which accounted for 35 of the participants. Participants were recruited through multiple channels, including social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Reddit, text messages, and Survey Circle. The survey was open to anyone who was at least 18 years old who actively smoked cigarettes or vaped nicotine. Participants were given an informed consent form. The purpose statement read, "In this study, we are measuring your personal attitude and beliefs about smoking and vaping within social group settings. This survey takes approximately 5 minutes or less to complete. We are a group of students collecting this data for a senior research capstone project. In order to participate in this study, you must be at least 18 years old. There are no foreseeable risks from participating in this study. There are no direct benefits for participating in this study. Your participation is completely voluntary and your responses are completely anonymous. Data will be kept by the researchers and our faculty advisor." Participants were then asked to answer 34 questions that measured attitude, perceived normative pressure, and perceived behavioral control in regards to smoking cigarettes or vaping nicotine in social settings over the next 2 weeks. Afterwards, they were asked to provide their demographics, which included age, sex, gender, and ethnicity. Now on to the measures. Intention. Participants responded to 7 items showing their intentions to smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape in social group settings during the next 2 weeks. For instance, items like "I plan to smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape" assess their intentions using a 7-point scale, ranging from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. Another item being "I will smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape" measure the likelihood of their behavior from extremely unlikely to extremely likely. Cronbach's alpha for this scale was 0.85, indicating good internal consistency. Attitude. Participants responded to 10 items assessing their experimental and instrumental attitudes towards smoking cigarettes or using a nicotine vape in social group settings during the next 2 weeks. Each item used a 7-point scale, from 1 being bad to 7 good, positive to negative, valuable to worthless, unpleasant to pleasant, enjoyable to unenjoyable, harmful to beneficial, boring to appealing, important to unimportant, necessary to unnecessary, or productive to unproductive. Cronbach's alpha for this scale was 0.83, showing good internal consistency. Normative pressure. Participants responded to 7 items measuring their perceptions of social norms related to smoking or vaping in social group settings during the next 2 weeks. Each item used a 7-point scale. Descriptive norms were evaluated through statements such as "most people who are important to me smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape in social group settings," ranging from 1 being definitely true to 7 being definitely false. Injunctive norms were measured by gauging beliefs about approval and expectations from significant others regarding smoking or vaping behaviors in social settings, such as "the people in my life whose opinions I value would approve of me to smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape in social group settings," ranging from 1 approve to 7 disapprove. Participants also indicated their level of agreement with statements reflecting perceived social pressure to smoke or vape, such as "I feel social pressure to smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape in social group settings," ranging from 1 strongly disagree to 7 strongly agree. Cronbach's alpha for this scale was 0.79, showing good internal consistency. PBC. Participants answered 8 items rating their perceived ability to control their smoking or vaping behavior in social group settings during the next 2 weeks. For example, autonomy items like "it is mostly up to me whether or not I smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape" assess their sense of personal control using a 7-point scale, ranging from 1 strongly agree to 7 strongly disagree. Capacity items such as "if I wanted to, I could smoke cigarettes or use a nicotine vape" measured their beliefs about their ability to perform these behaviors on a scale from definitely true to definitely false. Cronbach's alpha for this scale was 0.87, showing excellent internal consistency. Now for the debriefing. Participants were provided with the following debriefing statement. The purpose of the study was to measure attitudes and beliefs about smoking cigarettes or using a nicotine vape in social group settings and how these attitudes and beliefs predict intentions to engage in these behaviors. There is a great deal of research suggesting that smoking and vaping have significant implications for physical health, psychological well-being, and social dynamics. Understanding these attitudes and behaviors can help in developing interventions to reduce smoking and vaping, thereby promoting healthier lifestyles. For more information on the health impact of smoking and vaping, visit the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And they were also given our group's contact information as well as our professor's contact information. For the results section, I'm going to be discussing the descriptive statistics, correlational results, and regression results. I will present Table 1 and Table 2, which display the results in the next 2 slides. Descriptive statistics and correlations among the TPB measures are displayed in Table 1. The initial inspection of these results indicated that mean attitude, perceived normative pressure, PBC, and intention were all favorable. toward predicting smoking or vaping in social settings. All measures were very strongly and significantly correlated with each other. Moreover, attitude was the measure most strongly correlated with intention. Table 2. To test the hypothesis that attitude, perceived normative pressure, and PBC would combine to significantly predict intention to smoke or vape in social settings, a multiple linear regression was conducted. Consistent with the hypothesis, the regression was statistically significant, showing that the model accounted for a large percentage of the variability in behavioral intention. Attitude was the strongest predictor and was highly significant. PBC was also a very significant predictor. However, perceived normative pressure was not as significant predictor of intention. Study aimed to explore how attitudes, perceived normative pressure, and perceived behavioral control relate to intentions to smoke or vape in social settings. The results showed that attitudes towards smoking and vaping were the strongest predictors of intentions, followed by PBC and perceived normative pressure. Overall, these factors explain a significant portion of the variance in people's intentions. The findings support the theory of planned behavior, which states that attitudes, perceived normative pressure, and perceived behavioral control are key predictors of intentions. The strong influence of attitudes suggests that personal feelings about smoking and vaping are crucial in shaping intentions. This aligns with Connor and Norman's research, which emphasizes the importance of attitudes and health behaviors. PBC was also an important predictor, showing that people who feel they have less control over their smoking and vaping are more likely to intend to continue these behaviors. This finding is consistent with earlier studies that highlight the role of perceived behavioral control in health behaviors. Interestingly, perceived normative pressure was not a significant predictor in the model, suggesting that social influences might not be as important as personal attitudes and perceived control in predicting intentions to smoke or vape. This contrasts with some earlier research, which found that social pressure can significantly impact health behaviors. One possible explanation is that the participants may prioritize their personal beliefs and control over social influences because they are seasoned smokers/vapers. It is also notable that most participants had negative attitudes towards smoking and vaping despite engaging in these behaviors. This contradiction suggests a complex relationship between their attitudes and actions, possibly influenced by factors like cognitive dissonance or social desirability. The results have several practical implications. Interventions to reduce smoking and vaping in social settings would focus on changing attitudes and improving perceived control. Health campaigns could emphasize the negative consequences of smoking and vaping while empowering individuals with the skills and confidence to resist these behaviors. The findings also suggest that addressing perceived normative pressure alone might not be enough to change intentions. Despite its strengths, this study has several limitations. Firstly, the small sample size may limit the generalizability of the findings. The results may not be representative of the broader population of smokers and vapers, particularly across different demographics and geographic locations. Secondly, the reliance on self-reported data can introduce bias, as participants might underreport or overreport for their intentions and behaviors due to social desirability or recall inaccuracies. This could affect the accuracy of these findings. For future research, several areas warrant further exploration. Larger and more diverse samples. Future studies should involve larger and more diverse samples to improve the generalizability of these findings, including participants from various age groups, cultural backgrounds, and smoking/vaping histories, which would provide a more comprehensive understanding of the factors influencing smoking and vaping intentions. Longitudinal designs. Utilizing longitudinal designs would help to better understand the causal relationships between attitudes, perceived normative pressure, and perceived behavioral control and intentions. Tracking changes in these variables over time could provide insights into how intentions to smoke or vape evolved and what factors influence these changes. Additional predictors. Exploring other theories that include additional predictors such as emotional regulation, stress, and personality traits might provide valuable insights. Factors like emotional responses to stress or individual differences in susceptibility to addiction could further elucidate the complex relationship between attitudes and behaviors. By addressing these limitations and pursuing these research directions, future studies can contribute to a more detailed and accurate understanding of the factors that influence smoking and vaping intentions, ultimately aiding in the development of more effective public health interventions. In conclusion, this study shows that attitudes and perceived behavioral control are significant predictors of intentions to smoke or vape in social settings. While perceived normative pressure was not a significant predictor, the overall model explained a substantial portion of the variance in intentions. It is interesting that most participants had negative attitudes towards smoking and vaping, even though they engaged in these behaviors, indicating a complex relationship between attitudes and actions. These findings highlight the importance of focusing on personal attitudes and perceived control and interventions aimed at reducing smoking and vaping. We have now reached the end of my research study presentation. I hope you found the theory of planned behavior interesting in the context of smoking or vaping in social settings over the next 2 weeks. Thank you.